The same world that demanded you be perfect now calls you too much or too intense to being exactly what they created. Since childhood, society has programmed you to believe your worth depends on achievement and external praise, and validation of that achievement too, but then acts shocked when you can't just relax as an adult. When were you ever allowed to just be a work in progress? When was the last time someone celebrated you for trying something new and being terrible at it? What's more, society puts people on a pedestal for what they do, not for who they are. And social media makes it worse by adding comparison and competition at scale and the need for validation from the whole world in order to be seen as valuable. You're forced to compare yourself to millions of highlight reels, everyone showing their victories but hiding their struggles. And the message becomes that perfection is normal and expected. Anything less is shameful and devalued. And then after creating this pressure cooker, society turns around and diagnoses you as the problem. They demand excellence, then call you intense for delivering it. Perfectionism is not just about wanting to do tasks diligently. Perfectionism is usually about survival, not standards, and it can manifest by you seeking to control the environment, control the outcome, or control yourself. Maybe all of those three. Beneath the surface, there is also often a complex, multi-layered response, not only to social pressures, but also to childhood experiences. Early family dynamics and societal pressures reinforce achievement-based self-worth, with most perfectionists often growing up with conditional love or harsh criticism, and the message being that you're only valuable when you're getting it right. Behind each type of perfectionism lies a child who learned that love, acceptance, or safety depended on being perfect. Most of us embody multiple types of perfectionism, but there are three main types that I want to share with you today. The first one is self-oriented perfectionism, or the harsh self-critic, and you tend to have an internal dialogue that reflects this harshness. You grade yourself constantly, and you're highly sensitive to making mistakes. This means your emotional world can feel like a bit of a roller coaster, because when you meet the standard, that feels great, and you feel good about yourself. You feel affirmed and validated. But when you don't, those positive feelings, they dissipate, they go away. Physically, self-oriented perfectionists feel a lot of tension, chronic muscle tension. They might experience racing heartbeats, and they can have really disturbed and troubled sleep. And it's often affected by rumination about past mistakes or anxiety about not performing something well enough in the future. The research shows that this type has actually increased by 10% since the 80s. And the next type I'm going to share with you is increased by even more. My reflective audit question for you here is, can you find satisfaction in good enough, or is everything all or nothing? So that second type I mentioned, that's socially prescribed perfectionism. And this is when you believe everyone expects perfection from you and others impose those unrealistic standards on you. Individuals with socially prescribed perfectionism also experience a negative physical response as well, in the form of elevated cortisol levels, which suggests that their body is exhausted from constant perceived evaluation from others. And this one has increased by 33% since the 90s. Your internal dialogue here often centers around pervasive fear of other people's judgments. So you might have thoughts like, I'm not good enough, others will reject me if I'm not perfect or if I make that mistake, and I must meet their standards, otherwise I'll face severe disapproval or harsh criticism. Studies also show that people judge women more harshly for making mistakes than men. And if you're a minority, that scrutiny doubles. My reflective audit question for you here is your perfectionism internally driven, or is it based on what you think other people expect of you? Some of you might already be thinking, Louise, I struggle with both self-oriented and socially prescribed. While the third type that I want to draw your attention to is the procrastinating perfectionist. And this is where the drive for excellence becomes the very force that prevents achievement. Your perfectionism and your high standards become so overwhelming that you avoid tasks entirely, and you'd rather avoid them than risk imperfection. Recent research between 2020 and 2025 reveals that 20 to 25% of adults are chronic procrastinators, and perfectionism is the underlying cause behind a lot of that due to the fear of failure that perfectionists can have. My reflective audit question for you here is, can you take action despite risking imperfection, or do you avoid tasks that might not end up perfect? So you can see the perfectionism is multi-layered and it's complex. Setting these unrealistic standards for yourself comes at great cost. The cost includes not only the physiological symptoms I mentioned, but feelings of failure, guilt, indecisiveness, procrastination, shame, isolation, exclusion, and low self-esteem, as well as mental health implications such as anxiety and depression. And like I said, it takes a huge physical toll too. It doesn't just cause the chronic muscle stress that I mentioned, but it's linked to things like gastrointestinal issues and insomnia as well. So how on earth can you survive all of this in a world that is judging you and criticizing you at every point if you're not perfect, but then excluding you and judging you all the more when you panic and stress over trying to be? First thing I want to share to help with this is to start recognizing when society is pushing you into perfectionism. Identify the difference between when you're actually feeling pressure due to your own standards and passion or values compared to when it's actually about society's expectations. Can you spot the difference? Because there is a difference between caring about quality and being terrorized by the possibility of judgment from other people if you're not perfect. The second thing I recommend based on the work I've done with clients is to have compassion for yourself. You have done so well walking a tightrope all your life with little room to fall, little room to fail, to disappoint, to mess up. Become aware of where perfectionism and overachievement have actually held you back. Become aware of when they also took hold of you. When did you start to tie your self-worth to your accomplishments? And when did external validation start to mean so much to you, and why? Having compassion for yourself means starting the process of shedding those old beliefs and slowly learning that your worth was never conditional. When you're ready, start sharing these things you learn and the insights you gain with people you trust. When someone calls you too much or too intense, tell them what's really happening. When they say, "Oh, just relax," remind them that it's hard for you and share some of your story in the process. Third, be very intentional about building connection with people who don't worsen your perfectionism and make you fear getting things wrong, and who also don't make you feel like you've got to strive for their approval. They don't just dismiss you and call you too much. They understand that your perfectionism isn't a personality flaw. It's a survival mechanism in a hostile system. There should be people who give you room to lower your guard and still be loved and accepted if you make mistakes. They give you room to process those mistakes as well. And they don't hold you to impossible standards that they don't even live up to, but also that don't allow you to just be human. Your perfectionism does show up in and negatively impact your relationships too. And paradoxically, it can create the very rejection and isolation that perfectionists fear the most. So I do suggest you watch my Perfectionism and Friendship series, starting with Why Your Friends Don't Actually Know You, where I share 5 ways that perfectionism sabotages relationships and friendships, to be specific. I'll link that in the description box below. So here's what I need you to understand. Your perfectionism isn't your fault. You didn't wake up one day and decide to torture yourself with impossible standards. You adapted. You adapted to survive in a world that made perfection feel mandatory. The same parents who only noticed achievements, the same bosses who demand your 24/7 availability, and the same social media that makes everyone else look like they're always living their best life. They created this. Then they have the audacity to ask you why you can't just let things go and why you care about certain things. You're not broken. You're responding normally to an abnormal system. The solution isn't necessarily to lower your standards or care less. It's to recognize when you're responding to your own real passion, values, or needs versus the manufactured pressure. It's to build spaces in your life where you can be messy, where you can fail and learn from mistakes without retribution. It's to surround yourself with people who celebrate and recognize the courage it takes to try and to fail. And it's about rediscovering achievement driven by genuine passion and not just the rather exhausting need to prove that you're enough, because you already are. Thank you for watching this video. I recommend you watch this one next. But in the meantime, keep mastering what matters most.